Welcome to the information session for the Olympia Co-op Academy that'll be focused primarily on conversions, but it's about creating the next generation of ownership. This academy is sponsored by the City of Olympia through funding through housing and urban development programs at the federal level, and we're really excited to be partnering with the city for this. So first, a little bit about us. I represent the Northwest Cooperative Development Center. NWCDC is a 501c3 organization. We provide service throughout the Pacific Northwest states of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. We operate across the board within co-op structures and democratic governance models, but we have three main areas of focus. First, we help people living in manufactured housing communities buy the land underneath their homes and operate it as a resident-owned cooperative, a resident-owned community. We have about 20 of those in Washington. We also partner with a group in Oregon that does the same thing in the state of Oregon. We also help people create what are called home care cooperatives. This is where the home care providers, the caregivers, own the agency collectively and then manage it as themselves. We have 5 home care cooperatives in the state of Washington. We're looking to expand more and actually create a network of those cooperatives to help them get more resources. And then the other big area is conversions to worker ownership. So right now, the majority of small business owners are approaching retirement age, and COVID-19 has accelerated that drive towards retirement, but only about 20% of existing small businesses will transfer to the generation of ownership. And so we are here to help small business owners consider seeing the employees of their business be potential buyers for the business as a cooperative in which the employees would take over ownership from the seller. The seller would be able to retire safely, and we would move on with the new business. So why sell to the employees? That's always a great question. Sometimes they aren't seen as the potential buyers of a business. It might be that there aren't any family members interested in taking over a family business. Maybe, the kids have grown up, done other things, have other career interests. They aren't really that interested in coming back to run the family business. There might not be any other viable buyers. Or if there are viable buyers, they might really not be interested in the business as much as they might be interested in the contracts or the account lists, and they might not really have any interest to continue running the business as the business and simply just strip it for its assets and move on. The workers, on the other hand, have a vested interest in owning the business because it's their job, and it's not, even today, even in today's job market, it's not necessarily that easy to go out and find a job that's going to meet the needs that they have. And by taking over ownership of the business, they get a certain amount of job security as well as maybe better access to higher wages because they're able to take what the owner's making and divide that up amongst themselves. And then, of course, it also maintains the continuity of the owner's legacy in the community. So we'll talk a little bit in a second about how that affects Olympia that has a high number of worker cooperatives and conversions. But these are all really solid reasons. Sometimes the owner might even be able to get a better price from selling to the employees than they could on the open market, but we'll dive into that a little bit more as well. So some of the differences between worker ownership and like a single proprietorship, the first one is the big one. In single proprietorship or even a partnership, there's pretty much one decision maker. In the partnership, it might be where that's slightly diffused and there might be different areas of control, but basically there's one decision maker. In a worker co-op, everybody has one member, one vote, and they might channel that into either a elected board of directors or even create a manager that is empowered, but ultimately the workers on big decisions about the business and the long-term planning of the business have one member, one vote. So everyone really has to come together and at least get some sort of majority agreement. The owner is also the last to get paid. So I think any business owner knows this. You need to hit your payroll, you need to hit your vendors, and you kind of get whatever's left over. Hopefully you've worked that into a system where it's ongoing and easy to maintain. But if there's slow times, then you still have to kind of manage and be the last to get paid. Workers in a worker co-op are actually employees. So co-ops are legally they're corporations. That means that as owners, even though they're owners of the business, as employees, they need to make at least minimum wage. They get paid for overtime. They have unemployment insurance, workers' comps. They don't have what you would traditionally the risk associated with being an owner. And then also. Another example is right in the single proprietorship, the owner's really tied to the business. They can't just take off for a couple of years unless they really make some serious plans about paying someone to basically do their job. And then of course they have to pay them at whatever rate is required for them to do that. Whereas in a worker co-op, because they are employees, they can jump out and jump back in. I worked for 26 years in a taxi cab cooperative in the Midwest, and we would have drivers take summers off to pursue art festivals and ply their trade as an artist. We would have people start new careers and then come back, if that didn't work out or if they didn't like it. So we had a lot of flexibility and churning within the organization, which was fine because no one person was so central to the business that they couldn't leave. So, and it gives a lot of flexibility to ownership. And sometimes when we approach people about buying the business, that's one of their worries. They don't want to be, they see how hard the boss works, 80 hours a week or something, and they're like, I don't want that. But we explain to them that that's exactly not what the worker co-ops are about. And then, finally, there's unlimited liability, with single proprietorships. There's ways of legally getting around that with LLCs and S corps, but within a worker co-op, again, as a corporation, there are very strong liability protections. Even the board of directors is protected from a lot of the liability of actions. As long as laws are followed, pretty much individual workers are not going to be held liable for any debts of the organization or any errors that the organization makes. And then finally, worker co-ops as co-ops have a strong national peer network and regional networks where even though they might be in the same industry, people are really willing to help each other out and share information and share strategies. And so there isn't so much of a competitive atmosphere. It's more of a collaborative atmosphere within the cooperative network. Whereas, I think, in the single proprietorship, you're the boss, but you're also competing with all the people who are doing similar things. So if you're in a retail outlet and, in used clothes, for instance, or you're definitely going to be very cagey about sharing with your competitors because they're in the same market as you, whereas co-ops tend to be a little bit more flexible. So all that said, what is a co-op? And this is kind of a standard definition. We'll get more into this, of course, in the academy, but this is just to give a basic understanding so you can understand what the academy is about. So cooperative, this is the international definition. Basically, it's an autonomous group of people who voluntarily come together to meet their needs, right? And they do it through collectively owned and also democratically controlled enterprise. And that's where that one member, one vote comes in. There are a lot of different types of co-ops, and we break it down in sort of sectors. So most people are familiar with consumer co-ops like the Olympia Food Co-op, where the consumers are the member owners and they finance the store and basically get their needs met by getting access to types of foods that they want. But there's also what are known as shared services co-op. These are pretty common. Ace Hardware is one of the best known and that's where the individual members are actually the owners of the individual stores. And so the two Ace Hardwares in Olympia are separate owners, but they all into this cooperative and they have the same general value of that one member, one vote. Oops, I didn't want to go back. Producer co-ops are farmers mainly who are accessing better market share. They're consumer co-op, financial co-ops like credit unions. And insurance companies, anytime you see the word mutual in an insurance company, it generally means it operates on a cooperative basis. And then, of course, worker co-ops, which is mostly what we're going to be talking about, is where the workers own the cooperative. And then finally, you have multi-stakeholder co-ops, and this might be where, like for instance, Central Co-op in Seattle is owned by both workers and the consumers. Each have a separate membership path, and each sit on the board of directors, so they have equal. And Mary, could you possibly mute? Just going to take a second here. Mute Mary. Okay, there we go. Okay. So in Olympia, we have a lot of co-ops. We have a lot of worker co-ops, and Burial Grounds, Orca Books, Business Services Co-op, Dumpster Values, New Moon Cafe are all businesses that were converted from existing businesses into cooperatives. Working Systems is another one. Olympia Food Co-op, of course, although it's not a worker co-op, it does have a staff collective. So instead of having a formal management structure, the 80 staff members of the Olympia Food Co-op operate as a collective and then work with the board of directors. Capital Home Care is one of our home care cooperatives. They were a startup made up of, I think they're about 15 caregivers right now. Northwest Construction Co-op actually spun off the Northwest Painters Co-op. So you can see there's a lot. And to give you an idea on this, cities like Cincinnati, Madison, they have about a dozen or so working co-ops right now. New York, San Francisco, Oakland, Boston have, a couple dozen or even up to 50 co-ops. Olympia, with 52,000 people, we have about a dozen to 15 worker co-ops and 2 or 3 that are in transition. So we're doing pretty well. It's a very small rural becoming urban community, and I think that's really exciting. It also means that there's a lot of support for anyone going into this venture. In fact, when we talk about the academy, we'll talk about how we're going to tap into some of these folks and ask them to and hopefully have them come out and share their stories and answer questions for you. So I'm going to quickly talk about what the process is. So in a cooperative conversion, the way it's done is a standard business transaction that the business gets sold either as an asset sale, where we create a cooperative formed by the workers to buy the business, or we do what's called a stock sale, where the existing owner sells a percentage of interest in the business to the employees, and then once everybody's in, they make the change. So how does this work in reality? So a stock sale means you're selling, that's the whole company, including all the intellectual property and goodwill. And basically the workers step into the seller's shoes. And that means that all the liabilities also go with the buyer. So if there's any debts or any lingering, like say there's a slip and fall incident from 2 or 3 years ago, and somebody comes back and says, yeah, I got injured on your property 2 years ago, the existing co-op is going to be, having to take care of that liability as well. That means it also gets all the cash. Any cash that's in the bank goes to the cooperative. The seller gets a tax break because this entire sale is taxed as capital gains, so wherever that is right now. I think that number is going to be changing in the next couple of years as certain 2017 tax breaks get retired and may not be renewed by Congress. So this is really an interesting time if you want to sell, but I'm not a tax lawyer, I'm not an accountant, so you definitely want to talk to your accountant about that. Also, the buyer can't depreciate the price paid for the business. So that means, the first year there's going to be kind of a big hit on any profit and loss statement, but that's okay because that's not why the workers are buying the business. They're buying the business to get control over their jobs, and ultimately the what we call the surplus or patronage dividend is sort of an added bonus at the end, not the purpose for them being there. For an asset sale, again, right, we basically would take the group of workers that want to pursue this, and they would form a cooperative, and then the cooperative would negotiate with the seller, and they would just buy the assets of the seller. So that means all the assets get enumerated, right? If the cash register is going to be in the sale, it needs to be listed. The liabilities, though, stay with the seller, right? If there's any existing debts, now the banks, if there is a formal loan, might insist at closing that liability be paid. That'll work into the sales price and the closing. But the physical assets all go to the store. The financial assets can be more fluid. They may or may not be included in the sale. A lot of that will come down to the negotiation. So what ends up happening is there is a little give and take, making sure the seller's liabilities get covered, that sort of thing. But the big thing is that if there's anyone coming back from, say, that, like the slip and fall, they would have a much harder time going after the new co-op, because the new co-op only bought the assets. They don't have any responsibility for that. So choosing when to do each sale can be difficult, and you need to look at it. Sometimes contracts or leases will be severed if there's an asset sale, so you might want to keep a stock sale. But other times you might want to lawyers tend to like asset sales because it's very clean and very neat and tidy, and there's a lot to say about that. So that's one of the things we'll explore early on, and because we need to know that going forward of how the transition is going to happen. That's going to affect a lot of the financing, and it's also going to affect a lot of the way that the group gets organized. And then finally, the way the sale happens can be a number of different ways. The most common is getting a loan. We work with Shared Capital, which is a cooperative based in Minneapolis. Their whole purpose is to fund cooperative businesses throughout the United States. They're what's called a Community Development Financial Institution, CDFI. They work with us and the buyers to put together a loan package. They usually require that the seller may participate in the loan, and almost all lenders will require that. It's to show good faith from the seller that it's a viable business, and so that's something to keep in mind. That means that there might be a period of time, up to 5-7 years after the sale, where the seller will be getting a check from the co-op for their loan, basically. And so in addition to the loan payment or to the sale, the seller will also be earning interest from the loan over that time period. You can also do equity sales and the seller can also finance the entire thing themselves. The seller can do 100% financing and just have it be a loan that gets paid back, or they can do an equity buyout where the seller maybe keeps a percentage of the company. This is probably more likely in a stock sale, and then over time, that gets bought out. And then finally, there's earnout, which sometimes there's some issue about how the company is going to perform going forward. So there might be incentives for when that if certain goals are hit, that there might be performance-based payouts. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. So the Academy itself, what we do is we're going to spend 10 weeks in a 2-hour presentation session. Some might be 3 hours. We'll work with people on that and go through different parts of what has to happen in a conversion, and work with the Academy participants to really sort of in a boot camp style, get them moving towards this goal. In addition, for at least up to 5 Olympia-based co-ops, we'll also be able to provide 2 hours of in-person assistance per week. So depending how many co-ops we get, we might be able to, if we only get 2 Olympia-based co-ops, then we can provide them with 5 hours a week each, and to work on those things during the week. So when we talk about bylaws and articles, we'll come and meet with the co-op buyout committee, and we'll do some great work to really try to get those documents shown up. After the classes end, which will be sometime in March, we'll continue to work with these Olympia co-ops and I'm saying Olympia because it is being funded by the city of Olympia. So we do have funding for people who are outside of Olympia, but it's a different funding source. We will continue to support after class to work on these documents and processes and get them loan ready and work with lenders to basically work towards the conversion. And then the goal is to hopefully have businesses converted by the end of August, but we could go to the end of the year. And then during that, we'll also be connecting the different groups with co-op knowledgeable legal and accountant professionals. We know 3 or 4 different attorneys that we work with that are very knowledgeable about co-ops. We're developing some accountant professionals as well, and we can help you really get this sale and get the place set up. And then finally, there's post-conversion support. So let's say a group is able to do the conversion by June 30th, then we would still provide training and coaching through what's called the general membership meeting, where they would elect the board of directors and help train that board and in facilitation of membership and onboarding, and basically provide enough support to get the co-op so that it can, sort of a train the trainer model, where what we try to do is we try to train the co-op members how to do it, and so they won't necessarily need us in the future, and they can train the new people coming in as they go forward. So the Academy sessions itself, we're going to start with giving more detail into what is a co-op, or talk about the values and principles. Very likely then we would be working with co-ops about developing a mission statement and getting a sense of what they want that co-op to be focused on. Then we'll talk about due diligence. This is where we'll make sure that the business being sold is viable and can meet the mission that they want. and then we'll start talking about business modeling and starting to prepare the group to really make that purchase offer and understanding the finance models of the business and equity models, creating the business plan, as well as a marketing plan, especially as they're doing the transition. We'll talk a lot about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So what it means to be a cooperative is also, bringing those values into operation and how we treat each other as equal owners, as equal people within the organization. And then also tied to that is also accountability. How, if you have a group of 20 or 30 people, or like in my case at Union Cab, when I worked there, we had 250 equal members of the organization. So we had to build in some structures, because when you have 250 people, not everybody's going to follow the rules perfectly. And you have to have a way to adjust that and be accountable and fair and have due process. And so we'll talk about those structures. And then we're going to bring in a community panel of members from area co-ops in Olympia, worker co-ops, people who've gone through conversion, some who've done startup, and give them a chance to present and talk about their experience and also answer any questions you have. And then lastly, we'll work on a strategic planning process to help people get from the end of the session through conversion, and really a focused, narrow working document and plan to bring this vision into reality. So the needs for participation. So the first thing we need is a willing seller. So there's no point in trying to force somebody to sell their business to the workers. That's not going to happen. So we need owners that are interested in this, that are getting ready to retire, that are thinking this might be a good year to do it, especially with a lot of changes from retiring aspects of the tax code. And this might be the year that they want to do it. And then the next step would be, and we can help facilitate this discussion, willing buyers are the workers or consumers, because this could also be where consumers could buy the business too, if it makes sense, or it could be a combination of workers and consumers. Do they want to buy the business? And then some of these things we'll need for that second part to talk about due diligence, 3 years of the organization's finances, preferably in monthly statements, 5 years of the company tax returns. This will be for doing evaluation of the business. Absolutely, non-disclosure agreements. We'll probably ask everyone in the academy to sign a non-disclosure agreement so that, the information and discussion being shared stays in that room where, this isn't about broadcasting anyone's business information. This is about having what we need to be able to help pursue this conversion. And then lastly, a letter of intent between probably the willing buyers and the willing sellers, saying this is basically a non-binding promise that everyone will not consider other options until at least the academy runs its course, probably maybe even 6 months total, just to give a chance to see and explore and make sure this is all going to work out. So what if you just want to start a co-op and you're not really looking at converting an existing business? So can this work for you? Absolutely. We normally do this as a more general sort of co-op model. You're absolutely welcome. Well, this year our program is aimed at the conversion model specifically because of some discussions we had with the city. We can absolutely make adjustments. There's nothing in our academy program that we can't tweak for people doing startups. There might be things we do a little bit earlier or spend some more time on with a startup. So for instance, startups are going to have to do a little bit more market research to talk about viability of the business plan. They're going to have to, think a little bit harder about financing because it's a little bit harder to get a loan for startups than it is for conversions because there's not an active and financial history of the business yet. So, but we can do it, and we'll be happy to do it. So we don't want to turn anyone away. We are going to, really reserve some of that extra technical assistance time for Olympia-based businesses, but also if you're outside of Olympia, you're welcome to come in. We're thinking about primarily doing this in person. We're hoping to have these academy sessions in person, but of course, given the last 2 years, you can't really promise anything's going to be in person until you get to that date, but we're going to be looking at that. And we might also have an online version going as well. We're thinking about live streaming it as we do it. So if we're able to do both, that will be great. And then, we can still work with people outside of the Olympia area as well. So I just dumped a lot of information, I know, but I want to say enrollment begins anytime. You can go to our website at nwcdc.coop/only2022, and there's a form there. You can hit a button to register and fill out the form, and we'll get it. Or you can just email me at johnm@nwcdc.coop. We haven't determined the date or time yet. We're going to wait to see who's coming in. Ideally, we would like it to be we'll try to get a regular time, hopefully not too late in the evening, or if it's on the weekend, maybe more mornings, but we'll see. We're flexible. We're hoping to start it the week of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so that would be, I think, January 18th this year. Obviously, we wouldn't be on that day, but some day after that, and then run it for 10 weeks, so that'd be the end of March.